The enemy rounds tore through Forward Operating Base Sentinel like a metal storm, shredding sandbags and turning the Afghan dust into crimson mud. Sergeant Cash Reynolds pressed his back against concrete, watching his sniper go down with a bullet through the shoulder, knowing they had maybe 5 minutes before the compound walls fell. His voice cut through the chaos like a desperate prayer. "Any snipers here? Anyone who can shoot?" From the supply bunker, a quiet figure emerged, a woman they had barely noticed in 3 months of deployment, carrying something that looked nothing like standard issue. Adriana Medina raised her crossbow, loaded an explosive bolt, and everything changed. This is how legends are born, when the forgotten become unforgettable. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you are enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. Fort Carson, Colorado, 6 months earlier. The morning air carried that particular Rocky Mountain crispness that reminded Adriana Medina of her father's hunting lessons. She stood in the supply depot, cataloging ammunition with the kind of methodical precision that made her superiors appreciate her work, while simultaneously ensuring they never thought of her for anything more challenging. At 24, she had mastered the art of being simultaneously essential and invisible. Master Sergeant Dale Griffin watched her from the doorway, arms crossed over a chest that bore 30 years of service ribbons. His weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes tracked her movements with the assessment of someone who recognized wasted potential when he saw it. "Medina," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had survived 3 combat deployments and countless training accidents. She turned, snapping to attention with practiced efficiency. "Yes, Master Sergeant." Griffin approached, his boots striking the concrete floor with measured cadence. He picked up a requisition form from her neatly organized desk, scanning it with apparent interest, though they both knew he had not come here for paperwork. "Your marksmanship scores from basic," he said without preamble. "Barely passed standard rifle qualification. Care to explain why someone with your observed discipline and focus cannot hit targets consistently?" Adriana maintained her professional composure, though her mind raced through potential responses. The truth was complicated, rooted in skills the Army did not recognize, and training that had nothing to do with military doctrine. "I meet minimum requirements, Master Sergeant," she said carefully. "I have been working to improve." Griffin set down the form, his expression unreadable. "That is a politician's answer, Specialist. I asked you a different question." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of vehicles moving through the base and soldiers conducting morning formations. Adriana calculated her options against the risk of revealing too much. "Rifles feel foreign to me, Master Sergeant," she finally admitted. "The recoil, the noise, the way they handle. I understand the principles, but the connection is not there." Griffin nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he had already suspected. "You grew up in Colorado, Denver area?" "Colorado Springs, Master Sergeant, but we spent time in the mountains near Pueblo." "Hunting family?" Adriana hesitated. Her father's methods had been unconventional, rooted in traditions he had brought from Colombia before immigrating, not the kind of background that fit neatly into military conversations. "My father taught me to hunt, yes." "With rifles?" Griffin pressed, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "No, Master Sergeant." Griffin studied her for a long moment, decades of experience reading soldiers evident in his assessment. "Report to Range 7 at 1900 hours tonight. Bring whatever equipment you actually know how to use." Adriana's eyes widened slightly before she could control her reaction. Range 7 was the specialized training facility reserved for advanced weapons testing and unconventional tactics development, not the kind of place a supply specialist with marginal marksmanship scores typically accessed. "Master Sergeant, I do not understand." 1900 hours, Medina.
Do not be late." Griffin turned toward the exit, then paused. "And Specialist, whatever you bring, make sure it is something you can actually hit targets with. I do not have patience for demonstrations of mediocrity." After he left, Adriana stood motionless among the ammunition crates and supply requisitions, her carefully constructed invisibility suddenly compromised by a master sergeant who apparently saw more than she had intended to reveal. The crossbow. That evening, as the Colorado sun painted the mountains in shades of amber and gold, Adriana drove to her small apartment off base. The modest one-bedroom space contained little personality beyond the essentials of a junior enlisted soldier's life, except for one locked footlocker beneath her bed. She knelt beside it, entering the combination her father had taught her to memorize rather than write down. Inside, wrapped in oiled canvas, lay the crossbow she had crafted over years of patient work. Not a sporting weapon or recreational equipment, but a hunter's tool designed for precision and power in the unforgiving terrain of mountain wilderness. She lifted it carefully, feeling the familiar weight settle into her hands like coming home. The composite limbs were her own addition, upgraded from the original wooden construction, but the stock remained her father's work. Carved maple stained dark with age and handling, bearing his distinctive tooling patterns. She closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 12 years old again, standing in morning mist while her father adjusted her stance. "Remember, my daughter," Joaquin had said in the gentle Spanish that mixed with English in their household. "The crossbow is not about strength. It is about patience, precision, and understanding your target." Young Adriana had nodded seriously, absorbing every word as gospel truth. Her father had immigrated from Colombia's coffee region, bringing with him hunting traditions passed through generations of mountain people. In Colorado's Rockies, he had found terrain similar enough to feel like home, different enough to require adaptation. "When you fire," he had continued, positioning her fingers correctly on the trigger mechanism, "you must become part of the moment, not forcing your will upon it, but flowing with it. The bolt travels not because you command it, but because you understand where it needs to go." The memory faded as Adriana opened her eyes back in her apartment with the crossbow in her hands. Joaquin had died when she was 16 years old, a construction accident that had taken him suddenly and left her mother struggling to maintain their household. The crossbow had become more than a tool. It was a connection to her father, to his wisdom, to the patient discipline he had instilled in her before the world had taken him away.
She assembled her equipment with practiced efficiency. The crossbow disassembled for transport, along with a dozen bolts she had modified over years of private practice. Standard hunting tips for most, but 3 specialized bolts contained modifications she had developed through careful experimentation. Small explosive charges precisely measured, designed to detonate on impact, with enough force to drop large game or penetrate barriers. Her father would have been fascinated by the engineering, she thought. He had always encouraged her curiosity, her desire to understand how things worked and how they could be improved. Range 7. At Range 7, Griffin waited beside a reinforced shooting lane designed for heavy weapons testing. No other personnel were present, lending the session an unofficial quality that made Adriana simultaneously nervous and grateful. "Show me what you have got, Specialist," Griffin said simply, gesturing toward the range. Adriana unwrapped the crossbow, assembling it with movements so fluid they appeared choreographed. Griffin watched without comment, his experienced eyes noting the weapon's quality and her obvious familiarity with its operation. She loaded a standard bolt, raised the crossbow to her shoulder, and fired at the 50-meter target. The bolt struck dead center with enough force to penetrate the reinforced backing. Griffin walked to the observation scope, confirming the shot placement. When he returned, his expression revealed nothing, but something had shifted in his posture. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "Again," he instructed. 100 meters. Adriana adjusted her aim, accounting for distance and the evening's light crosswind. The second bolt struck within inches of the first. Impressive, Griffin acknowledged. Now, tell me why someone who can put bolts through targets at 100 meters can barely qualify with a standard rifle. Adriana lowered the crossbow, choosing her words carefully. My father taught me that every weapon has its own language. Rifles speak in noise and force. Crossbows speak in silence and precision. I learned the wrong language first, Master Sergeant. It has made learning the military's preferred dialect difficult. Griffin nodded slowly, his tactical mind clearly working through implications. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. Show me the range of this weapon. Maximum effective distance for man-sized targets. Over the next hour, Adriana demonstrated capabilities that defied conventional expectations. 200 meters with consistent accuracy. 250 with careful adjustment. At 300 meters, she could still strike center mass with regularity that would shame many rifle shooters. Griffin observed it all with professional detachment, asking occasional questions about reload time, bolt capacity, and maintenance requirements. When she demonstrated the explosive-tipped bolts against reinforced barriers, his eyebrows rose fractionally, the first strong emotion he had revealed all evening. "Those are your own design?" he asked, examining one of the unexpended explosive bolts. "Yes, Master Sergeant. Small charges precisely placed, enough to penetrate light armor or create tactical breaches." Griffin handed back the bolt carefully. "Specialist Medina, what I am about to tell you needs to stay between us for now. Understood?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "The Army is evolving," Griffin began, his tone taking on the quality of someone sharing classified information. Special Operations has been experimenting with indigenous weapon systems, traditional tools adapted for modern combat. We have seen remarkable results in certain environments where conventional weapons create disadvantages. Adriana listened intently, her mind racing ahead to implications. "Your crossbow," Griffin continued, "represents exactly the kind of unconventional capability we are interested in developing. Silent, precise, adaptable to specialized ammunition, and in your hands, clearly effective." He paused, letting that settle before continuing. "I cannot promise anything officially, but I can arrange additional training opportunities, help you develop these skills alongside your conventional weapons proficiency, if you are interested." Adriana felt something shift inside her, like a door opening onto possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. For 3 years, she had accepted her role as a supply specialist, convinced that her true skills had no place in military doctrine. "Master Sergeant, I am very interested," she said, keeping her voice level despite the surge of hope. "Good. We start tomorrow night, same time, same place. Bring your equipment and be prepared for intensive training." He paused. "And Specialist, keep this between us. Not everyone in command will understand what we are developing here." "Understood, Master Sergeant." As she drove home that night, crossbow secured in its case beside her, Adriana felt something she had not experienced since her father's death. Purpose. Direction. The sense that her skills, her heritage, her father's legacy might finally matter in ways she had never anticipated. The mountains loomed against the starlit sky, silent witnesses to a young woman's transformation from invisible supply specialist to something the Army did not yet have words for. Her father had taught her to hunt in these mountains. Master Sergeant Griffin was about to teach her to bring those skills to war. And somewhere in Afghanistan, Forward Operating Base Sentinel waited, though Adriana did not know it yet. Waited for the moment when Sergeant Cash would call desperately for any sniper, any shooter, anyone who could help save his dying soldiers. Waited for the quiet supply specialist to step forward with a weapon that looked like it belonged in a museum, not a modern battlefield. waited for Adriana Medina to remind everyone that sometimes the most effective warriors are the ones nobody expects. The training begins. For 6 weeks, Adriana lived 2 lives. By day, she remained the efficient supply specialist, processing requisitions and managing inventory with the same quiet competence that had defined her military career. By night, she became something entirely different under Master Sergeant Dale Griffin's demanding instruction. Range 7 transformed into her private proving ground. Griffin pushed her beyond anything her father had taught, combining traditional crossbow techniques with modern tactical applications. Where Joaquin had emphasized patience and harmony with the environment, Griffin demanded speed, adaptability, and lethal efficiency. "Your father taught you to hunt animals," Griffin explained during their 4th session, watching her reload after a rapid-fire drill. "I am teaching you to hunt men who hunt back, different calculation entirely." Adriana adjusted her grip, sweat dampening her uniform despite the cool evening air. "The principles are where it starts, Master Sergeant, but a deer does not return fire. An enemy combatant does. You need to think 3 moves ahead while staying invisible to their tactical assessment." He activated the range's advanced targeting system, projecting multiple moving silhouettes that appeared and disappeared at random intervals. "Engage 4 targets, 20 seconds, prioritized by threat assessment." Adriana's mind shifted into the focus state her father called still water. Surface calm, hiding constant motion beneath. She identified threats based on weapon profiles, positioning, and exposure windows. The crossbow rose, tracked, released. 4 bolts, 4 targets, 18 seconds. Griffin checked the computer readout, his weathered face revealing the closest thing to approval he had seen from him all evening. 17.3 seconds. Threat assessment correct. Shot placement within acceptable parameters. Acceptable is not optimal, Master Sergeant. Nope, it is not, which is why tomorrow we add live fire stress conditions. Noise, smoke, simulated incoming fire. See how your still water holds up when things get loud.
As weeks progressed, Adriana's conventional weapon scores improved marginally, enough to avoid administrative attention while not revealing the true depth of her development. Griffin insisted she maintain plausible mediocrity with standard rifles. "The moment command sees exceptional marksmanship scores," he explained, "they will reassign you somewhere your real skills become buried in conventional doctrine. Right now, you are nobody's priority. That is exactly where we need you." The strategy chafed against Adriana's competitive instincts, but she understood the logic. Invisibility provided freedom to develop capabilities that existed outside standard military parameters. During their 7th week of training, Griffin introduced modifications to her crossbow system. A specialist from Special Operations Research arrived after dark, carrying cases that bore no identifying marks. "This is Chief Warrant Officer Hayes," Griffin said simply. "He is going to help us enhance your equipment." Hayes was perhaps 40, with the lean, weathered appearance of someone who had spent years in hostile environments. He examined Adriana's crossbow with professional interest, his hands moving with practiced confidence. "Solid craftsmanship," he observed, noting the carved stock and reinforced limbs. "Your father's work, the foundation." "Yes, I have made modifications over the years." Hayes nodded, setting it aside carefully. "What you have built is impressive for individual development. What we are going to create together will be functional for operational deployment." Over the next 3 hours, Hayes demonstrated enhancements that existed nowhere in official military procurement systems. Modular bolt designs that could accept different payload configurations. Specialized tips for various tactical applications. A compact loading mechanism that reduced reload time by 40%. Special Operations has been developing indigenous weapons systems for specific environments. Your crossbow represents capabilities that fill gaps in our tactical options. Silent elimination at extended ranges. Specialized ammunition delivery without acoustic signature. Maritime applications where conventional weapons fail. Adriana absorbed every detail, her mind already calculating tactical applications Griffin had not yet mentioned. What environment specifically? Hayes glanced at Griffin, who nodded permission. Riverine operations, dense jungle canopy, urban scenarios where acoustic signature compromises entire missions. Anywhere traditional firearms create more problems than they solve. Afghanistan? Adriana asked quietly. Among other locations, Hayes confirmed, not quite denying it. After Hayes departed, Griffin spent an hour drilling Adriana on the new equipment's capabilities. The modifications transformed her crossbow from hunting tool to specialized combat system, maintaining its fundamental character while enhancing tactical functionality. Chief Hayes does not make social calls, Adriana observed, securing the upgraded weapon in its case. What is really happening here, Master Sergeant? Griffin leaned against the shooting bench, his expression revealing more than he typically allowed. The conventional military believes standardization equals effectiveness. Every operator trained identically, equipped identically, thinking identically. It produces consistent results, which command loves because consistent results are predictable. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But war is not standardized. Neither are enemies. Sometimes you need operators who think differently, fight differently, bring capabilities the enemy has not planned for. That is what we are building here. And when deployment comes? When deployment comes, Griffin said, you will go as a supply specialist officially. Your crossbow stays hidden until the moment it becomes necessary. If that moment never arrives, you return home having served competently in your assigned role. And if the moment does arise? Griffin met her gaze directly. Then you do what your father taught you. You hunt, you adapt, you survive. And you trust that the skills we are developing will be enough.
2 weeks later, Captain Samantha Clark conducted a surprise inspection of the supply depot. Clark had commanded Alpha Company for 8 months, earning respect through tactical competence rather than command politics. She walked the aisles with practiced efficiency, noting inventory accuracy and organizational systems. "Impressive operation, Specialist Medina," Clark observed, reviewing the computer records. "Your predecessor left this place a disaster. You have turned it into a model facility." "Thank you, ma'am. Just following standard procedures." Clark looked up from the computer, her sharp eyes assessing. "Standard procedures do not create this level of organization. This requires discipline and attention to detail beyond typical supply management." Adriana maintained professional composure, uncertain where the captain's observation was leading. "I have reviewed your entire service record. Exemplary administrative performance, adequate but unremarkable marksmanship scores, minimal disciplinary issues, a perfectly average soldier, except your efficiency metrics are anything but average." The implication hung between them. Clark had noticed something did not quite align. "I work hard, ma'am. Supply management might not be glamorous, but I take pride in doing it well." Clark nodded slowly. "Master Sergeant Griffin has been requesting unusual training facility access. Range 7, after normal hours. Administrative records show you have been granted access as his training assistant." Adriana's pulse quickened, though she kept her expression neutral. "Yes, ma'am. The Master Sergeant requested help with equipment testing for specialized weapon systems." "Interesting," Clark said, closing the file. "Because Range 7 access requires security clearance verification. Your clearance came through special operations channels, which seems unusual for a supply specialist." The captain's tone remained professionally neutral, but Adriana recognized the tactical assessment occurring.
Clark was too experienced to miss patterns that did not fit conventional explanations. "I could not speak to administrative procedures, ma'am. I just follow the orders I am given." Clark studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Keep up the excellent work, Specialist, and if you ever decide your talents might be better utilized elsewhere, my door is open." After the captain departed, Adriana stood motionless among the supply crates, realizing their training had not gone unnoticed as Griffin had suggested. Someone in command had been watching, tracking, evaluating. That evening, she reported the conversation to Griffin during their training session. He listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. "Clark is sharper than most. Good tactical mind, better instincts. She suspects something but does not know what specifically. Should we stop the training? No, we're too close to operational readiness. Besides, Clark's curiosity might work in our favor eventually." "How?" Griffin activated the range's advanced targeting system. Because when the moment comes that you need official authorization to use your skills, having a company commander who already suspects you are more than a supply specialist could be advantageous. Over the following weeks, Adriana noticed subtle changes in how others perceived her. Not dramatic shifts, but small tells that suggested information was circulating through informal channels. Corporal Brett Sanders, a combat veteran with 3 deployments, started including her in conversations about tactical scenarios. Specialist Enrique Valdez, the company's communications expert, began seeking her input on equipment placement during training exercises. Private Vanessa Lopez, one of the few other women in the unit, approached her directly during a lunch break. "Some of the guys have been talking," Lopez said quietly, settling beside Adriana at an isolated table. "Saying you've been doing some kind of specialized training? True?" Adriana weighed her response carefully. Lopez was competent and discreet, someone who understood the challenges women faced in male-dominated units. "I have been working with Master Sergeant Griffin on some additional skills development. Nothing official." Lopez nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. "The guys respect Griffin. If he's investing time in you, that means something. Just wanted you to know that not everyone thinks women can only handle administrative rules. Appreciated. Also wanted to warn you," she lowered her voice further, "Corporal Sanders has been asking questions, not hostile ones, just curious. He's old school but fair. Might be worth talking to him directly before rumors get creative." That evening, Adriana found Sanders at the company area reviewing maintenance schedules for their vehicle fleet. He looked up as she approached, his weathered face neutral but assessing. "Corporal Sanders, could I have a word?" "Sure, Medina. What's on your mind?" "I chose directness. I understand you have been asking about my training activities with Master Sergeant Griffin." Sanders set down his clipboard, his expression shifting to something resembling respect. "Not asking about, observing. There's a difference. You've been hitting Range 7 after hours for almost 2 months. Griffin doesn't waste time on mediocre soldiers, which means you are developing something worth his attention." "I cannot discuss the specific nature of the training, Corporal." "Didn't ask you to. But I've been doing this job for 12 years. Seen a lot of specialized programs come and go. Some work, most don't. The ones that work usually involve operators who bring unconventional skills to conventional problems." He paused, gauging her reaction. "We're deploying to Afghanistan in 6 weeks. Alpha Company attached to Special Operations for forward-based security operations. Hostile territory, limited support assets, high probability of sustained combat. The kind of deployment where unconventional skills become valuable." Adriana absorbed this, the timeline suddenly accelerating from abstract future to immediate reality. 6 weeks? 6 weeks, Sanders confirmed, which means if you're developing capabilities that might help keep soldiers alive, now would be the time to finalize that development. He picked up his clipboard, preparing to return to work. "One more thing, Medina. Whatever Griffin is teaching you, whatever skills you're building, the men will judge you based on performance when things get real. Not your gender, not your job code, not your administrative role. When bullets start flying,
The only thing that matters is whether you can help bring everyone home alive." "Understood, Corporal."
The attack came at 3:47 in the morning, when darkness reached its deepest point and human alertness naturally ebbed. Adriana was reviewing inventory logs in the supply bunker when the first mortar round struck the eastern perimeter with a flash that turned night into brief daylight. The base alarms wailed, redundant. Every soldier at Sentinel had already moved toward defensive positions, months of drill transforming reaction into instinct. Adriana grabbed her rifle and helmet, sprinting toward her assigned location while explosions marched across the compound in a pattern that spoke of careful planning. This was not a probing attack. This was the assault intelligence had predicted. Sergeant Cash Reynolds commanded the northern sector from a reinforced observation post, his voice cutting through the chaos. "All stations, weapons free on confirmed targets. Conserve ammunition. Watch for infantry assault following the bombardment." Through the explosions and smoke, Adriana caught glimpses of muzzle flashes on the ridge lines. Multiple positions, coordinated fire, distances that put them beyond effective rifle range for most defenders. The enemy had positioned themselves perfectly, exploiting the tactical gap that Sergeant Foster's medical evacuation had created. The infantry assault began minutes later. Enemy fighters emerged from darkness like ghosts, moving with discipline that suggested professional military training. They advanced in coordinated rushes, using terrain for cover while maintaining suppressive fire. The defenders responded with professional intensity. Rifle fire erupted across the perimeter. The heavy machine gun engaged with devastating effect. But the enemy kept coming, and their ridgeline commanders directed the assault with impunity from positions American rifles could not reach. Adriana moved between positions, distributing ammunition and helping evacuate wounded soldiers. She watched Specialist Vanessa Lopez take shrapnel from an explosion, saw Private Noah Martinez fighting with desperate courage despite obvious fear, witnessed Staff Sergeant Dolores Herrera working with focused intensity on casualties that kept mounting. The northeastern sector began collapsing. The heavy machine gun team took a direct hit, eliminating their most effective defensive weapon. Enemy forces breached the perimeter completely, engaging in brutal, close-quarters combat. Reynolds's voice came through the radio, urgent but controlled. "All available personnel to the northeastern sector. We are about to be overrun." Then came the moment that would define everything. Reynolds keyed his radio again, his voice carrying desperate necessity. "Any snipers here? Anyone who can engage targets at extended range? We need those ridgeline positions neutralized immediately." Adriana stood frozen for a heartbeat, feeling the weight of decision pressing down. 3 years of invisibility, 2 months of secret training, this singular moment when capability must become action or remain forever potential unrealized. She sprinted to the supply bunker, retrieved her crossbow from its secured case, and assembled it with movements born from countless hours of practice. The weapon settled into her hands like destiny, finding its form. She reached Observation Post 3 as another mortar barrage began. Through the darkness and smoke, she identified enemy commanders on the ridgelines, directing their forces with confidence born from tactical advantage they believed unassailable. Reynolds appeared beside her, his weathered face registering shock before professional assessment took over. "Medina, what are you carrying?" "Specialized equipment, authorized by Captain Clark, Sergeant. Effective range 300 meters, possibly further. I can engage those positions." Reynolds made his decision with combat leader certainty. "Then engage. Priority targets are enemy command posts directing the assault. Neutralize them and we can turn this fight." Adriana loaded her first explosive bolt, feeling her father's lessons flowing through muscle memory. Patience, precision, understanding the target. She acquired the primary enemy commander through her optics, adjusted for range and wind, and released. The bolt flew across the darkness like judgment rendered. The explosion transformed the ridgeline position into brief sunrise.
The enemy commander disappeared in fire and fragmentation, along with fighters receiving his orders. Secondary explosions followed as their ammunition ignited. "Confirmed kill," Reynolds said, his voice carrying renewed energy. "Continue engaging. All sectors, enemy command structure is being disrupted." Adriana worked methodically through priority targets. Each explosive bolt eliminated positions that had directed the assault with impunity. Enemy fighters on the ridgelines, suddenly leaderless and vulnerable, began withdrawing. The infantry assault against the perimeter faltered without coordinated direction. American defenders, sensing the shift, pressed their counterattack. Corporal Sanders led forces that trapped enemy fighters who had breached the perimeter. The tide turned from desperate defense to hard-won survival. As dawn painted the eastern sky, the battle's intensity finally diminished. Enemy forces retreated toward the mountains, leaving their dead scattered across terrain they had expected to control. Captain Clark's voice came through the radio net. "All sectors, hold positions and conduct accountability. Medical personnel begin triage operations." The aftermath. Adriana lowered her crossbow, her arms trembling from sustained tension and adrenaline depletion. Around her, soldiers moved through post-battle routines with exhausted efficiency. 8 killed in action, 23 wounded seriously, 47 with injuries treated at Sentinel. The numbers told a story of survival against overwhelming assault, but each number represented a person whose life had been forever altered. Reynolds found her as she secured her equipment. "Specialist Medina, Captain Clark wants to see you. Command post, immediately." The command post occupied a reinforced bunker. Captain Clark stood beside Lieutenant Colonel Peterson, both officers bearing evidence of the night's violence. They looked up as Adriana entered. "At ease, Specialist. Close the door." Peterson spoke first. "Sergeant Reynolds credits you with neutralizing enemy command capabilities that were directing the assault. His assessment suggests your engagements were decisive in preventing base overrun." "I engaged targets as directed, sir." "With a crossbow," Captain Clark interjected, something approaching disbelief in her tone. "You eliminated 15 enemy combatants at ranges exceeding 600 meters using a medieval weapon modified with explosive projectiles." "Yes, ma'am, that is accurate." The officers exchanged glances, command decisions being made in real time. "Your performance will be recognized through appropriate channels," Peterson said. "You saved American lives under circumstances that would challenge veteran operators. However, you also created complications regarding approved equipment configurations."
Clark moved closer. "I authorized you to maintain specialized equipment. I did not explicitly authorize combat deployment. Technically, you violated regulations by engaging with non-approved weapons." "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "Do you? Because the implications include potential administrative action and equipment confiscation. They also include the fact that 8 soldiers are alive because you violated those regulations." Peterson interjected. "Captain Clark and I will submit joint recommendation that your actions be recognized as tactically justified. Your equipment will remain authorized. However, expect scrutiny from higher headquarters." "Understood, sir." "Dismissed, Specialist. Get some rest." 6 months later, home. The transport aircraft descended through Colorado sky, the Front Range Mountains standing sentinel over familiar terrain. 6 months had passed since that night at Forward Operating Base Sentinel. 6 months of continued operations, administrative reviews, and the slow process of soldiers finding their way home. Adriana's mother waited at the arrival area, her weathered face reflecting pride and relief. Their embrace lasted long enough that other soldiers maneuvered around them, respecting the private moment. The recognition ceremony occurred 2 weeks later. Adriana received the Bronze Star with Valor device for actions that had saved American lives through extraordinary heroism. Her mother watched with tears as Captain Clark pinned the medal to her dress uniform.
But more significant than the medal was what followed. The Army established a pilot program for unconventional weapons integration at Special Operations Command. Master Sergeant Griffin was developing training protocols, and Adriana had been selected as primary instructor. She stood before her first class of students 3 months after returning stateside. Among them were soldiers from multiple units, contractors working in hostile regions, and specialized personnel whose roles required skills outside conventional parameters. My father taught me to hunt in Colorado mountains before I understood those lessons would someday apply to war. He taught patience, precision, and respect for weapons connecting users to traditions spanning generations. The military taught me how to adapt traditional skills to modern requirements. Afghanistan taught me that unconventional solutions sometimes address problems conventional doctrine cannot solve. She gestured toward her crossbow, now joined by other indigenous weapon systems on display. This course is not about replacing conventional weapons. It is about expanding your capabilities for situations where standard options create disadvantages. Learn these skills, master these tools, but never lose sight of their cost. The mountains remember. That weekend, Adriana drove to Pueblo, to the mountains where her father had taught her to hunt. At the meadow where Joaquin had first demonstrated proper stance and breathing control, she assembled her crossbow with movements that had become ritual. She was not hunting. She was reconnecting with the foundation her father had built before military service had transformed childhood skills into combat capabilities. The first bolt flew across mountain air, striking a dead tree trunk at 200 meters with precision requiring no conscious calculation. Each shot represented integration of past and present, tradition and innovation, her father's wisdom and her own experience. I hope I honored what you taught me, Papa. I took your lessons about patience and precision and used them to protect people. Sometimes that meant taking lives. I think you would understand, even if understanding came with sadness about necessity. The mountain offered no response beyond wind and distant bird calls, but Adriana felt peace settling into spaces where doubt had dominated since the battle. Her mother prepared dinner that evening in their Colorado Springs home. As they ate together, Carmen spoke carefully. You have changed, my daughter. Not just obviously, but fundamentally. There is capability in your eyes mixed with sadness. Just remember that strength does not require carrying burdens alone. They talked long into the evening about Afghanistan, about Joaquin, about the journey that had transformed invisible supply specialist into recognized warrior. Later, alone in her room, Adriana cleaned her crossbow with meditative focus. The weapon represented connection to her father, to Griffin, to capabilities that saved lives while taking others. Her phone displayed a message from Sergeant Reynolds. The men wanted you to know, we are alive because you stepped forward when conventional options failed. That matters more than any regulation or recognition. Thank you. Adriana set down the crossbow, feeling its weight settle into place where capability and consequence balanced against each other. She had proven that quiet soldiers with unconventional skills could matter when circumstances demanded. She had stepped forward when Reynolds called desperately for any sniper, any shooter. She had drawn her explosive bolts and transformed into something legends were made of. The mountain stood silent beyond her window, holding memories of her father's teachings and her own experience. In that silence, Adriana Medina found peace, not by forgetting what she had done, but by honoring it with continued purpose. Some legends emerged from fanfare and recognition. Hers had emerged from desperate necessity, proving that sometimes the most important warriors were the quiet ones who stepped forward when conventional heroes failed. That truth mattered more than medals or recognition, and it would continue mattering long after her story faded into the mountain's eternal memory.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you will not want to miss them. Just click to watch. And do not forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.